your voice with the NRP. This and every Monday, 8:30 to 10 p.m. Join host Stephen Semanas and the NRP candidates as they amplify your voice.
Good evening, I'm Stephen Semanas, your host of Your Voice with the NRP, a program hosted here on Von Radio every Monday night from 8:30 to 10. It's cold and windy on the outside. And as somebody said to me today, reflecting on the unusual March weather, the wind of change is blowing. As a result, the leader of the CCM is scrambling to find reasons to explain his litany of failures at the local level. He's searching left, right, center, top, bottom to explain his failed double-salaried failures at the federal level, his inability after 7 years to bring a fair share to Nevis. And today, his tactics hit an all-time low. He tried desperately to put a wedge between the Guyanese people residing on Nevis and the Nevis Reformation Party. We've got a lot to talk about tonight, all the way up to 10 o'clock. And our special guest, she's solo in the house tonight, Dr. Patricia Bartlett, in full medical gear with her N95 mask. So you can bet that she will be surgical. We'll take a break, and then we will be right back with Your Voice with the NRP.
Your voice with the NRP. This and every Monday, 8:30 to 10 p.m. Join host Stephen Semanas and the NRP candidates as they amplify your voice.
Our special guest tonight, Dr. Patricia
Bartlett.
Patricia Bartlett. Why am I thinking Liebert tonight? These Nevis names. The Premier today took his attacks to an all-time low, signaling for sure that we're into the silly season. One writer commenting on Facebook commented of his painted demeanor at a function held by the Hindu community on Nevis at a festival called Pagwa, the Festival of Colors. Now, he made a comment in response to that post that one person is a reflection of the whole NRP, and that the NRP is against the people, the good people of Guyana. Now, the writer of that post back tonight. I have experienced Pagwa in Guyana. I have experienced Pagwa in Nevis. I have been drenched with water and powdered from head to toe. Pure joy and enlightenment. And then there is him who only seeks to exploit and divide. Not this time. J.D. Keynes, the candidate for Nevis 1, also posted on Facebook. She said, let us raise our arguments and lessen our attacks. Raise the standards, man. Gosh. And of course, Dr. Patricia Bartlett, who goes up against the incumbent Premier and representative for Nevis 2, she's been responding as well. I've been getting her response from all over the globe. People sending her writings, her postings to me. But Dr. Bartlett, desperation is setting in. The Premier and leader of the CCM is searching all over for ways to discredit his opponent. And you clapped back as well. Good evening.
Good evening, Steve, and thanks for the invitation to join you tonight. I would like to extend greetings to all of the listeners and the viewers at this point in time. It's a pleasure to be back. Unfortunately, we have to be talking about my opponent, which I really don't like to take my valuable time to talk about, but just to put things into perspective. Because today, like someone made the observation, he reached an all-time low. This idea that he thinks that he can just divide everyone so that he could succeed is not playing well with me, and I had to respond. I'm usually a little, self-conscious when I read my own posts, but just to share for the benefit of those who may not have been on Facebook, I didn't say anything untoward. I merely just stated, the fact and the way I felt about it at the time. And my response to him was unbelievable, because it was just one person who made an unfortunate, statement, and he just wanted to paint the whole of NRP as if this person was sent to speak on behalf of the whole of NRP about this particular event. And people know what happens, on Facebook. But I don't get into cursing with the premier. We know he's better than me at that. So I just sometimes just respond in the kind of level-headed way that I think, he ought to be dealt with. So I just said that I thought it was unbelievable. So I said to him, you think that one person's view is now NRP view? And of course I had to point out that you think he's bright, or ask him if you think he's so bright, because that is him. And I really wanted to encourage him to just directly to respond to the person who would have made the post. That was, like I said, an unfortunate post. I said I went to school in Guyana, so I know that they have free education from kindergarten to university. So no one would think that Guyanese are not well read and not well educated. Of course not. So with that kind of exposure, I said to him, so they should see through you by now. You're always wanting to use others to elevate yourself, but action speaks louder than words. After all the care you have for them, or you claim that you have for them, the non-nationals were the same ones you forced against their will to take the vaccine when you couldn't convince your very own to do so. As divider-in-chief, you would mash up a country just to rule over it on both sides of the narrows. Meanwhile, struggling families continue to suffer, nationals and non-nationals alike, and you have had no solutions to offer. And I signed off by saying that it was sad.
Very, very sad indeed. Why do you think he's given to these divisive politics? We just came off a weekend where the Guyanese community held a very successful event at the E.T. Willett Park. They fashioned it after our own Culturama. They called it Mashramana, I think coming from Mashramani, which they hold in May, around Independence time. And everybody went there, Nevisians, Guyanese, Jamaicans, and everybody went there and had a good time.
Indeed.
And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, here he comes with his divisive tactics.
I guess when he got there, he was maybe a little overwhelmed because we were interacting I met him there, actually. And we were interacting with the Guyanese community because we have a lot of friends in the Guyanese community. As a matter of fact, I've had a lot of them that I've worked with or done work for me, or, I have a good relationship with the people in the Federation, who are from Guyana. So I guess he felt that we should not get any attention because as ladies and well-dressed, and he didn't like my clothing. Because he thinks that everybody should be wearing a clown suit like him. So I guess he felt uncomfortable because he kept moving around. And I at one time I had to remark, it's like, is he shadowing me? Everywhere I turned, he was there. And I was like, something is wrong with this chap. But in the event, I just laughed it off. But we had a good time. As a matter of fact, JD was the MC, for the little short ceremony that they had. And we were quite engaged and we had fun. We were eating their food. We didn't go to scorning anybody. I didn't see him eating the same food though. We drank, we had a good time. And then to wake up this morning to this kind of foolishness, with him trying to divide people. But it's a strategy that has apparently worked for him in the past. And he's going to milk it for what it is worth, because to tell the Guyanese or the non-nationals, NRP don't like you, for what reason would I not like my Guyanese counterparts, because these are people, like I said, I have working relationships with. So I don't know of anyone on this team that he could point a finger to say that we have issues with the community and that we would not look after them as well as we would look after nationals. So in his failing to be able to convince them now, he's trying to drag other people who are not even on the platform, drag other people's statements into it and trying to validate and say, well, here, you see, this is it. I keep telling you all that, NRP don't like you. But I'm like, I know that Guyanese they're smarter than that, By now, they should understand his play. Because they could have made reference to the vaccination. I mean, you care about these people so much. And your first thing was you're going to force them to get vaccination. You couldn't convince your own people, but you're going to force them. Take advantage of them, whether they wanted it or not. They will have to line up to get it just so that I can work. That was unfair. And I don't think that he made a good impact. Or the impact would have been a negative one when he would have made that move. Because in Simkis, they didn't do that, But he found it necessary to pounce on the same Guyanese who is now, who he now wants to use in the next election. But for him, it is always about what he can gain in the next election. And I hate to have to talk about him. But just to settle the matter, because I don't want to, after tonight, ever be able to reference anything that he says again. Because I don't think that we should take valuable time, because it is a distraction. Apart from the fact that it is divisive, it is a distraction as well. And I had to consult with someone in the NRP who would have had, of course, a longer tenure in the party than myself, and asked them, well, what is it that we would have done, for Guyanese to demonstrate that they are a part of us? And he said to me, you know what? We had an issue as it relates to work permits for unskilled workers. We had brought the work permits down to $1,000. And now I think they're paying something like $1,600 for it. The same NRP, the same CCM who now claim that they care about Guyanese so much, or non-nationals so much, they have found it best to increase the work permit costs on these people, and things are so hard, instead of reducing it. But you know what? Coming close to election, they probably will do that now and waive them just so that they can get favor, using the state resources for political gain. And as it relates to work permits for professionals, I was told that the NRP the work permit had reduced it to $2,000 instead of $2,400, and so people were able to save $400. And of course, they also worked closely with the federal government as it relates to the residency fees. And so if you went to high school here, you only had to do 3 consecutive years of work permits, and then after that, the residence would just cost you $300 annually. So I think that efforts were made to at least alleviate some of the stresses, financial stresses, that non-nationals were facing, because we recognize at the time when NRP was in power that there was a downturn in the economy. What are we doing now for them, except trying to dangle little things when it comes close to an election? We have not done anything meaningful for them, because in the meantime, they're struggling to, dead economy, to make ends meet, and no one is reaching out, except for a little $150 food stamp now and then, trying to alleviate the pressures that they're under. So we're going to see, and he likes to talk about how barley grows. We're going to see how barley grows this time around, because I don't think the non-nationals necessarily going to fall for the same thing over and over again, because that is the only thing he has to offer. Close to an election, he said, oh, NRP don't like you. Come, we give you a little money. And then after that, they suffer. But as I had an interaction with one non-national a few days ago, I would have pointed out to him, look, when you came here with an intention to better your living condition, better your life, make some money, because everybody, well, let me not say everybody, but most of us, we want to go back to our homeland eventually. Sometimes we just have to go out sometimes to make things a little easier economically for the family. And so making those kind of sacrifices of being away from your family, you don't want to be away from your family indefinitely. You want to be able to make money in an economy that is booming and return home as soon as possible thereafter. Because I know of some people who would have been here, even from Guyana, who made some money, went back, because circumstances were such, the economy was such that it facilitated that. But now, for the past 7 years, nothing is happening. You know, as Auntie Shelley would say, nothing a kip. So people, all the monies that they would have accumulated, you know, they have to be pinching on it, you know, and the opportunities are not coming. And this is a fellow who would have come along and said, vote for me and things would be better. But I think they recognize now that things are not going to be better, and they probably will be here longer than they initially wanted to be here, because they just cannot sit away to be able to put away something to go retire early and go home to their families. So I encourage them to start looking at the issues that are being presented and see what we are offering as opposed to what the other side is offering, and just try to ignore the noise, because that is just what he is, a noisemaker and a divider. He goes to St. Kitts, he divides St. Kitts people. He come to Nevis, he want to divide the nationals to the non-nationals. But I don't think that is a strategy that is going to play out this time.
This election will be about bread and butter issues, making people's lives better. Now, as you said, this is a distraction from the big story that happened in St. Kitts just over a week ago. The war of words among the warring factions of the unity government. We know that bombs and missiles are raining down on Ukraine. But here we have had a similar thing happening. And the Kingmaker, who told us 7 years ago that we should give him the authority to go to St. Kitts to bring back all the goodies for Nevis, went on a platform in St. Kitts in front of dignitaries, the diplomatic corps from around the world, to shout from the mountaintop, trying to do a little bit of Obama and a little bit of Martin Luther King in between, that he had failed, that Nevis has not gotten its fair share. I know this is the first time you're here since that fiasco, and I know you have some strong thoughts on it.
Well, I am, yes, here as in on your voice with the NRP, but I was on Let's Talk last week, and I did share with the audience what I felt and what I thought about the display, because I just couldn't understand how big grown men who want to be leaders could conduct themselves in such a manner, you know, in front of dignitaries, like you said. There wasn't anything diplomatic about anything that they did, and I thought it was uncalled for. I thought it was an unfortunate, situation, and it just, to me, revealed that the level of, well, I don't want to, maybe I shouldn't say that, but they're not ready yet. Let me leave it that way, because the level of immaturity, I just don't want to say what, but yeah, it was not a good day. It was not a good day. I refer to that as an intervention, not as a convention, because I've never ever seen anything close to that, passing as a convention. So I think that they deserve a do-over, and they should never invite him to be the featured speaker, because he's just a divider. Because he went with his agenda, obviously, because I would have seen a message that was circulating prior to the convention, the intervention. And he was beckoning to his supporters, or let me not call them supporters, his followers, to come to St. Kitts to support. And apparently there was some resistance, because some people didn't feel comfortable going, with him for whatever reason. And so he said to them, come on, let's go. It is going to be something for, and let me use the term that he used. He's saying that it would be a defining moment for his party and for Nevis. So when I heard defining moment for Nevis, I was excited, it piqued my interest. And I said, oh yeah, well, let me follow this one closely, because if something is in it, So I started to think about what could be this big bombshell that he was going to drop as the featured speaker. And I said, you know what? Chances are it is related to the Charleston Accord, and he has now taken on the advice on board that NRP has been dishing out for the longest while, asking him to get it in law, because as a lawyer, and he claimed to be bright, he ought to have known that the Charleston Accord, at the time, they were not sitting ministers. So they're just ordinary people like me and you. And he ought to have known that the accord that they signed, even if they had written it on a brown paper bag, it would have the same weight, you know, because it wasn't worth anything. I mean, how do you enforce something like that? You dividing up the resources of the country, and you're not even in power. You know, so I don't understand how he expected that would just be automatically accepted as if it were policy or as if it were law. And so I know that Dr. Daly has been on radio and Carlisle, and they've always been telling him the same thing, but of course he doesn't like to listen to good advice, you know. So I thought that he had finally decided, okay, let me just take the advice for what it's worth and go to St. Kitts, negotiate with the one who wants to be Prime Minister next, because for me, I dubbed it what did I say? The Keon Power Purchase Agreement. Because of course, it was a power purchase thing.
Sounds like geothermal. We're gonna get to that later.
We'll get to the geothermal part. But this was for me a transaction. He wanted to get something out of it. Well, he claims that he wanted fair share for Nevis. You know that this comes up close to an election, right? Yeah. So he wants to use that, but obviously he needs some money for campaigning, because it is, you know, he wants to be able to buy the election again. So my thing was, okay, he has something to sell, which is support to the next person who wants to be leader. So he gets his power, and then in exchange, then he would get it into law. And then he'll get the monies just in time so he could buy the next NIA election over here. So I thought, you know, I felt a little, you know, heartbroken that is how it's going to, you know, come down to that. But, you know, it is power that they're searching for, obviously. Because in the midst of a war going on, we're just coming out of a pandemic. Well, we're not even out of a pandemic, you know. But we had a little lull, you know. And so the effects, based on the effects that it would have had on the economy of Nevis, St. Kitts Nevis. And now we're going into a war, which is going to compound that. So we're getting a double whammy. And these guys, instead they call a session and start to discuss the way forward. How are we going to help our people? How are we going to purchase energy? Because all other leaders in the world were scrambling to purchase energy, to secure energy for their people. These guys are purchasing power for themselves. And I thought that was quite, you know, unfortunate. So I was so disappointed when he started and I didn't see any movement, because my prediction was that he was going to be the one to draft the legislation, make it legislation now, you know, since we know that your card doesn't really carry much weight, draft the legislation, present it to the accountant, he's the lawyer, present it to the accountant who wants to be, you know, leader next, and then between them, the accountant would give him the nod and say, okay, when you bring it to Parliament, I'm going to make sure that my side, the four of us now, that we would support you. And so you would get what you want just before the election, and we would get, and I would get what I want. I thought, you know, so I'm expecting him now to pull out this paper out of his jacket pocket, you know, he's like well dressed. So I'm expecting the man to pull the thing out of his jacket pocket and present it and say, here, and wave it, and then call up Sean and they hold hand and wave the hand and say, here, we've done it. We finally have the prescription for fair share. I was so disappointed. The man got up there and just cursed from beginning to end. And at the end of the day, what did we get? What did we get? I understand that his request was for immediate release of $21 million. I don't know what the justification was, because he claimed that we were just getting 45. We should be getting 100 plus, he said. So he wants the first tranche to be $21 million. I'm like, that's curious, But I understand that the paraphernalia started to come in, so I guess the spending, invoices are being, for the next election. So that was his request, I understand, for the next morning. And so people were walking around and smiling, I hear, So someone said, oh, so I think that it didn't have any effect. And I was like, well, if it did have an effect, weren't you supposed to come back to the same people who you were balling to yesterday to let them know that, okay, I requested 21 and I was given 21, or I was given 1 or 2 or whatever it is? Because for them, or for him rather, There's no accountability. Seems not to be able to account for anything. And so he asked the question, if Nevis should get its fair share, and I am not debating whether or not Nevis should get its fair share. I am for fair share for Nevis from day one. Before the accord even came, there were times that I didn't vote on any federal election because I didn't think we were being treated fairly. So fair share for Nevis for me is a given. I have not met any Nevisian who does not want fair share for Nevis. So it's not like anyone, CCM wants it more than NRP. So putting that aside though, the fair share issue as it relates to the laws, we want to make sure that irrespective of who is there, Nevis is going to get its fair share. It doesn't have to be a coalition. Even if we have all 18 syndicates at any one point, I still want to maintain that Nevis deserves its fair share and it should be in the law. So that is the direction I'm hoping that we would go, because he gets his 21 now and it is pacified. So, you know, he has him out for a little while until something else comes up. But we all know that he has a propensity to spend, and he would spend and spend as long as it is available. So when he asks the question about what could Nevis have done if we were getting 100 million instead of 45, and I was like, but you can't account for the 371 million that you already got. And you have the nerve to ask Nevis people, what could we have done with the next 100 million? If you are going to be the one to spend it the way you would have spent the first 371 million, chances are we would see nothing for it. And it grieves my heart that we just sitting here not trying to advance the economy of Nevis so we could get in a position where we don't have to be dependent on the handouts from syndicates, because we ought not to be in this position. We are bright people, and the Premier himself always, you know, talking about how bright we are because, well, of course, he's the head honcho. But we are bright people, so by now we should be able to cope with something, man. Some little thing. He like to talk about people not being creating, not even having a little soda stand or whatever, a Freco stand. But Nevisians need more than a Freco stand. He has been able to provide PEP workers to clean the side of the road and other things, And I'm like, that is the level at which you aspire for Nevisians. So I must go open my Freco stand because I cannot open an electronics place, So that is the level of thinking as far as he's concerned. So when you're asking the question, what would we have done? You have to account for the monies that you receive. And he has a tendency to always want to conflate the issues, want to confuse people. So when you ask him, account for the 371 million, he says, oh, don't worry about this 371. Don't worry about what we got and we spent foolishly. Worry about what we didn't get. But we can't continue to worry about what we didn't get, because you know what? In the middle of all this, after all this song and dance, tonight we're not sure, because this CBI, it is such a volatile industry, because I call it an industry now. It is so volatile that it could evaporate from us tomorrow, with the pressures that are being brought to bear from the EU and the US as it relates to trying to push legislation to get us out of the business of selling passports. We have to take a pause. We have to start thinking seriously about the implications going forward. Because if today we are fighting with syndicates just to get whatever is there, whatever piece of the pie, suppose tomorrow the pie disappears. What are we going to do in Nevis? And that is a question I think he needs to lend a little more thought to. And he ought to be scrambling around, trying to get people who know about the economy. People who have ideas, economists, because we have some bright people most of the times, mind you. They might be overseas. They're expats for, not necessarily because they really want to be outside, but because the opportunities are not there. And we have a lot of educated people out there. Reach out to them. Reach out to the people in the diaspora. We have people right here on the ground as well. We can't ignore the people who decided that they would stick to it, stick off in.
Dr. Hall at the OAS has gone silent on us recently. We're not hearing anything from him, and he's supposed to be a top economist.
Well, maybe he's consulting with him, in the
by phone.
But I'm not seeing any movement towards us, at least trying to look for those strong economic pillars on which Nevis you could have a foundation. Because right now we have just hitched our wagon to St. Kitts, and that is the play. That is all the game. There's no other game in town for us. And how could that be sustainable? Nevisians shouldn't go to bed thinking that tomorrow things might go sour, and the relationship between CCM and the rest of the party, the coalition, is not so good, and they just decide to turn their backs on us. Then what? That level of uncertainty is not good for people. And things are getting more and more expensive, and I think we'll get to that.
We certainly will.
But really, I say, let us get the laws and the supporting regulations, and it must be brought to Parliament. It can't just be you on a one-on-one basis, because this thing has been going around. He has brought it to Cabinet, or at least one of his surrogates would have said that, it has been to Cabinet time and time again, and letters have been written. And then we're hearing another side that it never came to Cabinet, but he had meetings with the Prime Minister. All that kind of thing need to, be done away with. We can't continue to operate like that for the life, or whatever remaining life there is, of the CBI. We can't continue to operate like that. And in the meantime, I want to strongly recommend to the Premier, because I know he's listening, try and sort out the economists who could help. Try for us to get advisors who really can help. This business about paying people who you like, or people who are in your close circles, calling them advisors and all that, paying $9,000 and all that cannot work. That is a waste of resources. We need to focus on really growing the economy of Nevis.
That's a good point for us to take another break. We're at the top of the hour. It's 9 o'clock.
But the economy is broken, the government stick. Can the opposition come and take a seat? The dirt is high and employment's low, and it's the poor people who taking the blow. I say we tired, we need a revolution. We just can't depend on vaccination. I say we tired, time to pick ourselves off the floor. Just remember, people matter more. So when you hear them talking bull on the radio, people used to matter more. Whether you red, blue, orange or yellow, people used to matter more. But when they needed us for last election, we were always there for option. But now they in and they comfortable. People don't matter no more. Whoa, some people may not like this, but people used to matter more. RCC and them made a slogan out of it. People used to matter more.
And we're back with your voice with the NRP. And on board with us, Dr. Patricia Bartlett, going up against the Premier in constituency number 2. And of course, as usual, your calls are invited, 469-1616, 469-1700. Now, the Premier does not have the benefit of having been a career civil servant like yourself or myself. And sometimes I get the impression that he doesn't quite understand the way government works, even after 7 years. The thought that money from the federal government should just be handed over, the fact that you're going to sit in a parliament for 7 years and not have the Charlestown Accord codified, thinking that written on a piece of paper is worth gold. It blows the mind. What are your thoughts? Does he truly understand the way the system works?
Well, I don't think he has really, availed himself, for that kind of teachable moment, because of course, they pushed out the senior minister who was there, the financial person. And since then, there's nobody to say come back. But obviously, he suffers from the fact that, he has not had the exposure and it shows, that's why the Prime Minister could run circles around them, because he just sits there like an adult and says, but you didn't do what you should have done, because as it relates to procedures and stuff like that, he obviously, does not have the idea. He doesn't know how things are done, the procedures and the processes.
Hold your thought there, Doc. We've got our first caller on the line. Good evening, caller. Welcome to Your Voice with the NRP.
Good evening, Mr. Manners.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening to your guests.
Evening.
The matter of money for Nevis is a vexing issue on both sides. It's a vexing issue for the Premier because he claimed that he doesn't get enough. It's a vexing issue for me because he has gotten so much and has not accounted for it. Now, the politicians, when elected, they swear an oath using the Bible. Now, the Bible refers to whom much is given, much is required. The Premier of Nevis has been given much. As a matter of fact, he boasted recently that what he would have gotten, the NRP got zero. So whether it's 261 million as he claimed that he got, or the 371 which the Prime Minister said he gave, he would have gotten significantly more than what NRP got, according to his analysis. The question is, what has he done with the money? And would we as a Christian people hold on to the biblical mantra to whom much is given, much is required, and ask him to give a proper accounting for that which was entrusted to him to use on the behalf of us, the people of Nevis? There's another reference too, where the Lord would have given his servants some money and trusted him with them to invest it. And we know that two went out and invested and they was given more. One refused to invest because he was lazy and did nothing. And that from which he had was taken away from him and given to somebody else who would have performed. I want us to take this analysis as a people and say to the Premier of Nevis, we would have entrusted you with much. You would have done nothing with it. And so we are going to take what we would have entrusted to you, from you, and we'll give it to somebody else who has a proven track record that they could manage. And that is the Nevis Reformation Party. So I am imploring all the people of Nevis, put party colors aside. In this economic hard time that we are now facing, and everybody is trying to make the best out of what we have, it is clear that the Premier of Nevis did not, has not, and will not make the best and the most of what was entrusted to his care, because he clearly lacks the ability. And so to take that responsibility from him and give it to another who has a track record, proven track record, the Nevis Reformation Party. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining the conversation. Back to you, Doc.
Yes, I just to wrap up on the point, he obviously doesn't really have, the experience. He could still learn, he's still a young man. So he could still learn, but he's in a position where, sometimes people get elevated to, beyond their capacity to serve. And I think that is just what happened here, unfortunately. A lot of bluster, it's all about, show, it's all a show. And at the end of the day, we're not really seeing anything, because when I heard that we, made an approach for $21 million, I was saying, well, what I need to hear next, okay, I made an approach for $21, and this is how I plan to spend it. I need to finish this, I need to finish that, because there are a lot of unfinished projects before we can even move on, but we have to have a priority list, and I think that is something, again, that has been lacking. A development plan for Nevis, obviously, is not there, is not in the cards at all. We're not seeing that, even as it relates to housing, people just drop house in wherever government has land, just drop it there without any regards for, land use, allocations and stuff like that. I mean, it has just been a mess. Everybody just doing their own thing. And it is showing that the lack of experience, not necessarily because of age, because he's not a young man either, he just didn't have the exposure, I think. So it is good when people are choosing representatives in a field. It doesn't make any sense to choose somebody who has no experience, because it means that they're going to learn on the job. And if that person does not have at least, and it has been demonstrated, he has not had the best interest of the people at heart. It has been demonstrated time and time again. And so if that is lacking as well, then chances are you're not going to get the best leadership. He's not empowering the right people. When you look around, I'm like, what message is the Premier sending to our people who go to sixth form? I spoke to a young chap, and all he wanted to do, he didn't have any aspirations to be anything at this point. He just wanted some money. Mm-hmm. So he would drive truck because he see people who have trucks are making money. They're the only ones who are making money right now. And so his ambition right now is just to be a truck driver. And I'm like, that is so unfortunate. The kids coming out now, there's just nothing to do. And like the caller said, to whom much is given, much is required, much is expected. And if he had the requisite qualification and experience, then I think, we could have been in a better place. So when you're lacking in either one of those and you don't lend yourself to making up that deficit, then, it shows. And so I don't really want to belabor the point. I don't want to continue to go on about him. I just want to be able to focus on the cost of living and, stuff like that.
Well, we've got another caller on the line. Good evening, caller. Welcome to Your Voice with the NRP.
Good evening, Mr. Manners, and how are you?
I'm very well.
Good evening, Dr. Bartlett.
Good evening.
How are you?
I'm well as well.
Okay, I've been listening to this program for a while now, and I listen. And I said, tonight I'm going to call in, because I am calling because I'm a Nevision, and I am very upset at this present moment. I am so upset with the leadership of our Premier. Our Premier has failed us miserably. And I think it's time for Nevision to understand we are in an election year, and we have to go to the polls, and we have to vote seriously to remove the Premier. The Premier does not understand leadership, and Dr. Bartlett, the word young, you're in your 50s. When are you going to learn again? When are you going to learn again? I'm telling you, he gets down to Sinkit and Palm Convention, and he embarrassed every electorate in Nevis, everybody that goes to the poll and vote. And I'm telling you, I have nothing to do with, when it comes to Sinkit, but Sinkit stay right there they are. I am not against petition, but I am talking on behalf of Nevis. I'm talking on behalf of Nevision. He go down there and he embarrassed all of us, every one of us. The best time we have ever had from any Prime Minister, regardless of what you want to say about Dr. Harris. Is Dr. Harris? Labour and Palm had failed us because I had both parties either bounce or refuse check that come to Nevis. Both of them. Timothy Harris haven't failed us, haven't bounced a check or refused a check as yet, and we get more money from Timothy Harris than any Prime Minister. And what there to show? Nothing finished in Nevis. Nothing finished. I am now back into the hospitality, the tourism sector. I work for Mr. Dion Daniel, and I go to Oahu Beach every weekend, sometime in the midweek, to meet guests. And it's embarrassing to go down there at the Oahu Beach Pier to meet guests. You don't even have a proper system in place. A proper system in place. I am not even talking about that, even a proper guest arrival venue in terms of when a guest comes in, a place where you can meet them, they can have a drink and etc. Even that, but I'm just talking about not even a proper system in place. The guest then comes in and it looks like wild sheep and goats when they come in. Who is meeting them? Nobody is meeting them. Nothing proper. I'm telling you, our premier needs to go. And I'm calling Nevis when the premier set the date and call the election in Nevis. We go out and vote this gentleman out of Nevis because he does not understand leadership. He does not. And Mr. Manos, I am so upset how he embarrassed us in thinking and Palm Convention. Embarrass us. Really embarrass us. So I am asking Division to go out and vote in their numbers. Forget about CCM, forget about NRP. Vote for change. Vote for change. So we could look after Nevis and look after Division. It's time for him to go. It's time for him to go. And it's upsetting, really upset me as a Division here, the way he's leading our country. The way he's leading our country. My mother used to tell me, you can't make nails and catch a monkey. You can't make nails and catch a monkey. He gonna cost the man who will feed he. You gonna cost the man who feeding you. Nobody, I don't want to sound like I'm repeating myself, but I have to say that again. No prime minister have looked after us better than and Dr. Timothy Harris. I don't care what nobody says. I am not here to blow his trumpet because I am concerned about Nevis. And if he said Pam, he and Pam platform down there, and now being the featured speaker for Pam Convention. 7 years they've been in Parliament together now. 7 years. We are Pam all the time. I say about they're going to help you get fair share. We're Pam all the time. All of a sudden, Pam knows that we need our fair share. I tell you, the man lack leadership. So, Nevision, I am asking you, CCM supporters, NRP supporters, non-nationals, let's vote for change because we need it now. No. Have a wonderful evening, Mr. Manos and Dr. Babbitt. Again, I wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, caller, and change must come. We know that the Premier's favorite date is December 17th. It's on that day that he signed the Charlestown Accord, and again on December 17th is the day he went to the polls on the last time. But we know that the election will be way ahead of December 17th this year. But the caller made a very important point. The Premier has all of a sudden found a trusted friend in the leadership of the People's Action Movement. And he asked, where were they for the last 7 years? And the Premier, in his presentation, pointed out that, listen, in the first dispensation, Pam had 4, I had 2, PLP had 1, 6 of 7. In the second dispensation, Pam had 4, CCM had 3, and the PLP 2, 7 of 9. But it has taken 7 years to find an alliance with the PAM party, who for the first time on that convention day, I heard them say, Nevis must get its fair share. Is that a true friend in PAM, or, as you said earlier, it's an act of convenience? Tit for tat. You support me for the leadership in the next election, and I'll echo a call for Nevis's fair share.
Well, that's basically, the relationship, really. One doesn't have to look far to see that it is all about the transaction that could be made, and everybody is looking out for themselves. Not about the people, the people's interests. It just seem to be secondary, and which is so unfortunate, and it's about jostling for power, really. That's how it started, because obviously it's a dysfunctional relationship, obviously, and there's no trust there, for me. But trust doesn't, it doesn't seem as if trust ever did, reign in that domain, but now we're hearing people can't trust one another. But I don't want to get into there, don't get between family, I'm not going to take any sides. Maybe they deserve each other. I don't know, but I just know that Nevis deserves better.
Now we're going to switch gears in a while, but just one last comment. I chuckled, and it is my signature line of the convention speech, when he said, you all know King Bingi? The man who sing the song about SIDF money, he's here. I think he's here. He wasn't sure that he had followed him to Bastille. King Bingi hasn't had a career in the civil service either. But do you get a sense that the Premier felt a sense of helplessness and was looking for a Brownhillian to come to his rescue? I know it's laughable.
Well, he did well to get Bingy to go. He did well to get Bingy to go. That's all I'm going to say. Like I said, I really don't want to take up the time talking about them and their machinations, because, obviously...
It's too much.
Yeah, but obviously he was looking a little help. He needed help, He needed somebody to be able to cheer. And really the expectation was high, because finally divisions thought that we were really going to get this thing done now, and so I think he must have laid out a very optimistic view, to get Bingy to go with him. Because at the end of the day, if I were Bingy, I would feel stupid. They dragged me all this way down here, so we going to get food.
I thought he was going to call him on stage to sing the song as part of the speech.
Yeah, but he went down for his SIDF money. The fund has since shifted.
Yeah.
What we're dealing with now is not even SIDF.
Sustainable Growth
Fund, yes. So he went on to sing kind of, behind the ball.
Well, we've got another caller, our third for the evening. Good evening, caller. Welcome to Your Voice with the NRP.
Steve,
Hi.
Mark Brantley, as the Premier of Nevis, has now found a partner, as it were, in PAM. This is the same man who was telling us that when NRP joined with PAM, that NRP sold out Nevis to Sinkits. This is the same man who cussed hell out of Joseph Parry to the point when he said that they should have bust his head when he went and joined with PAM. This is the same man who was telling us, keep away from them Sinkers politicians because they do not like Nevis, love Nevisians. Now he is in bed because he wants something. The truth is, the two Labour parties in Sinkits, the Sinkers Nevis Labour Party and the People's Labour Party, has demonstrated that they serve Nevis better than PAM, who we put into office. It is clearly evident. I mean, if we were to get the history of the way PAM treated the Nevis Reformation Party, the way PAM treated Simeon Daniel, our first national hero, our only national hero, the evidence is clear. PAM is not best for Nevis. They have demonstrated that over and over. They have been ungrateful to us. They would have never entered into a political office if NRP did not join with them to put them inside there. And what they did to us, they stabbed us in the back. And now he come in and telling us that PAM somehow is going to be the savior of Nevis. An Ethiopian cannot change the color of his skin. A leopard cannot change its spot. PAM will not change and cannot change. When you have a party that has two of its main players inside the party are crooks and scammers and robbers, what do you expect? But then the thing is, crooks love crooks. And so to be associated with PAM at this day and age in the dispensation, knowing fully well the track record of elements within the party, and you associate yourself with that, it tells me that you don't have any class also. And if you could check your record, 6 1/2 dozen is the very same thing. And so the people of Nevis need not buy his argument about PAM, because he was the one who told us PAM is no good. As a matter of fact, the whole concerned citizens movement, that was the mantra, PAM is absolutely no good. And you know when they were killing us for joining PAM, who they were with? The Sinkers Nevis Labour Party. It's the Sinkers Nevis Labour Party that built them. And again, Timothy Harris, as the Prime Minister of the Federation of Sinkers and Nevis, has done more for Nevis than the two previous Prime Ministers before. Now the last thing I want to do, because Kennedy Simmons has a whole lot to say, the last convention he had a lot to say. This foolishness that they had, I don't know what to call it, he had a lot to say. I will want Kennedy Simmons, our only living national hero, to say to the Federation of Sinkers and Nevis, if any of the ministers from Nevis who serve in his cabinet ever got a full salary from Sinkers, that is something that is a hurting thing for the Federation of Sinkers and Nevis. It doesn't sit itself well nowhere in the Federation. But Kennedy Simmons conveniently refuses to address that while he addresses everything else that takes place in the Federation of Sinkers and Nevis. And so I have appealed to him, and I am appealing to him again, and I want the people of Sinkers and Nevis to appeal to him to set this record straight. Because what Mark Brantley and his team is doing to Nevis is nothing short of robbery. And I'm sure that the Bible will call that stealing. You cannot serve two masters at the very same time. There is no way, like outside of God Almighty, that you can be doing two jobs simultaneously and so therefore deserve to be paid handsomely simultaneously for two jobs. It is robbery, it is wicked, it is evil, and all the people in the Federation of Sinkers and Nevis who support that, support robbery, support evil, and support corruption. And I hope that we have a change of heart and change of mind and make this man account for that, because not only does he waste our money that was entrusted to his care, he's still robbing the revenue. So as I'm concerned, when he's pulling out a full salary out of our treasury every month, claiming that he's doing two jobs at the same time. Good night.
Good night, and thank you for calling in. We're going to switch gears. Now, last Tuesday, I happened to be driving to the Agriculture Department, and I saw a tent. When I stopped and asked, it was a ceremony to commission the new Wärtsilä engine. The Premier did say at that ceremony that he has not given up on his quest to bring geothermal to Nevis. He had said previously that he would throw the switch in December of 2017. Now let's look at what's happening in Dominica. I saw this article, Dominica's geothermal project unveils new development. In February, they signed a US $12.5 million contract with an Iceland-based company to drill 2 wells. Skerrit says that it would ensure the country will be powered by renewables, reducing energy costs and carbon emissions while creating jobs. The plant is expected to be operational by 2023 and will provide electricity to the French islands of Guadeloupe and Martinique, which in turn will encourage foreign exchange. The government partnered with the World Bank, CDB, Small Island Development States, the Clinton Foundation, and the country's CBI program also provided part funding. Average price of electricity is among the highest in the world, close to US $0.33 per kilowatt hours, and of course there's the volatility of international oil prices. The project, when completed, will increase the share of renewable energy in the country's energy mix from 25% to 51%, reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 38,233 tons of CO2 per year. It will power 23,000 homes with clean geothermal energy, which represents approximately 90% of Dominica's entire population. That sounds like a plan in Dominica. What's our plan here? Of course, he has said again he's still committed. Don't know if an approach has been made in this unity party to have funding from the SID program. And of course, you intimated that that could disappear maybe in the next 3 years. Do we have a plan to bring geothermal, or is it the usual flowery language?
Well, I would opt for the latter. I have not seen a plan. I have not heard about any plans. We've been discussing this issue time and time again. We've been talking about it. I'm not even getting a response from the other side. We are still glorifying Wärtsilä engine, diesel engine, at this time. And I know we've been here, we've discussed that before. And it's still a big song and dance, still trying to impress upon the populace that somehow the new Wärtsilä engine is going to make energy cheaper. No, I'm sure that every man, woman, boy, girl by this time would have heard that there's a war going on. Not only would they have heard that there's a war going on, they would have heard that the price of fuel going up. And the reason why is because something happening in Ukraine. Most people would have that foundation information already. What have we done? Why are we so vulnerable still? Because this administration has not taken seriously any of the sustainable development goals. We've talked about that time and time again. We have said to them that that is the platform on which we are going to campaign. The Sustainable Development Fund or the Sustainable Development Goals going to form the basis for us appealing to the electorate to make sure that they support us, because you can only go forward if you adopt something like that. All the world over, everybody is clamoring to make sure that they get on the Sustainable Development Goals bandwagon. And I've sent a post out to people appealing to us, and I'm hoping that the Premier read it, for us to wake up. It's time for us to wake up, seeing that we're being left behind. We're being left behind not only by Dominica, because look at the potential that they have now to export energy to surrounding neighboring islands.
Guadeloupe.
Right.
Martinique, yeah.
And it means that if God forbid the CBI crashes on them, at least they have something that they can look to. What do we have? We have not, we have not pursued that. And not only that, in the short term, the cost of fuel is so expensive now. The next thing that's going to happen is it's going to be passed on, obviously. And so who is going to feel it? The consumer in Nevis is going to feel it. Each household is going to feel it, except for those maybe who get in double salary that the chap, referenced a few minutes ago. Everybody is going to feel it, because when the price of fuel goes up, electricity is going to go up, because we must pay for the diesel that he's going to be putting in the same new brand, the Wärtsilä engine. Why have not we pursued renewable energy? It seems what is being, because everybody around us has started, and we're still, even though we would have boasted that we would be the cleanest,
greenest country on planet Earth.
cleanest, country on planet Earth. In 2017, we were going to show the switch. We are still nowhere close to reaping any rewards, reaping any energy from the geothermal exploits that would have been available to us. We knew that we had the potential to provide not only ourselves with the energy that we required for electricity, but the neighboring islands. We could have been way ahead. But now we are still in the back, like it seems we're at the back for everything. Just like we're at the back when it comes to the healthcare system. When everybody thought that the pandemic was over, we were just now coming in with 2 PCR machines, I mean, mind you, PCR machines are useful outside of COVID. You can use them for other diseases. But specifically for that, our intervention is coming at the end, when everybody else would have been ahead of us. And we continue to be last in so many things. I'm like, why? Why are we stuck? It's not like we have not been, at least, it's not like we have not been exposed to the constant recommendations from our people, the constant outreach from NRP saying, here, this is something that we can develop. We've been preaching that for such a long period of time now that I'm sure when they hear us, they're like, oh, that again. But renewable energy is the way to go. It is cheaper, or it should be cheaper. At this stage, maybe because St. Kitts now pursuing solar energy, we don't have the capacity now, or at least the potential now, to export energy to St. Kitts. So we are boxed in now. So it may not even be feasible when you look at it. The geothermal may not even be a feasible option for us now as it relates to renewable energy. But at least solar, start something, do something.
Or wind.
So we can right.
Not a single turbine has been added to Windward since they opened in 2010.
Right.
And of course, Dr. Daniel has said constantly, incremental steps can be made using renewables to power the hospital, or the schools, so that you cut down on the carbon emissions and, of course, the money you have to spend. You mentioned the war and, of course, inflation taking its hold on the country.
Yeah, plus in renewable energy, mind you, and specifically geothermal. In the Charleston Accord, it was referenced there that we were going to get the money from SIDF at the time, the Sustainable Growth Fund, to be able to pursue geothermal and get to the point where we can provide, energy not just for us but to export. And what has become of that? We're not hearing anything from the Premier on that. Why aren't you, at least? I didn't realize that he was supposed to be just selective about what you wanted out of the Charleston Accord. But that in itself is something that was a good idea that we should have pursued, because we are so vulnerable as it relates to the prices, oil prices, international prices. We don't set price. We are basically price takers. Whatever price they give you, you have to take it.
But there are things you could do, though. I happened to listen to Mayor Motley's budget address on the Barbados budget address last week. Gasoline in Barbados is $4 and change. Here it's $15. So government can intervene and do things to help the consumers, but it seems as if things are just going unchecked here. People are busy, as you said, lining up to be the next prime minister, doing other things rather than taking care of the people's business.
So true, but we have to at some point recognize the impact it's having on our economy because things are bad now and they're likely to get worse. And so we need a way out. People like to ask, well, so what would NRP do? But we've been saying what we would do. We must pursue renewable energy which is affordable, and clean. And that is one of the sustainable goals that we must make an effort to move towards. And for us, it wouldn't just be talk. This is something that we have talked about, we have thought about, and something that we would implement given the opportunity to do so. Because we can't leave ourselves so vulnerable. And the thing is, when you can produce your own energy, that is a plus, because investors would move towards places that they can get cheap energy. Because the only other thing we have going for us really is labor. And our labor costs are so high, it's not very competitive for us. So if we were to at least be able to offer cheap energy, we may be able to attract some businesses here.
Well, you said attracting investors. They were promised 9 years ago and they have not come ashore. And many commentators have said that what happened in St. Kitts last week, in full glare of the diplomats of the world, they would have on Monday morning or Sunday night, Monday morning, spoken to their bosses at home to tell them about what is happening in St. Kitts, Nevis. Some people are saying we are at a constitutional crisis. It's certainly weeks of instability. How on earth are you going to attract investors now when you haven't been able to do that for the last 9 years?
Well, I really don't think that any genuine attempt was made. I'm not seeing it. We are not feeling it. Nobody else. Well, no one else is seeing it either. So I don't think it's just me who is short-sighted. But all these promises and nothing to deliver, and why are you? And I just think that people have their priorities, mixed up as it relates to projects that are started and not completed. I mean, because there has not been any accountability, for these things. And for some reason, people get emboldened when they get returned to office, and they're like, okay, well, I got through and I wasn't performing.
Hold your thought there. We've got another caller on the line. Good evening. Join us on Your Voice with the NRP. Good evening.
Good evening, Steve, and good evening to the NRP candidate for St. John's. Dr. Bradley, I would just like you to say something further on the primary goal of the United Nations, the SDGs. It is to reduce poverty. That is the primary goal. The first goal is to reduce poverty. And so if you're asking the NRP, the voters to vote NRP, then I'm sure they would like to know, A, what is the level now, and B, what can we do to reduce the poverty? Because that is the primary goal. That is the first on the agenda. Thank you.
Yeah, the caller made a valid point, because the SDGs were created to reduce or to eliminate poverty, because the goal is for zero poverty. Not only that, but to protect the environment, and then to make sure that you have prosperity for all, you know. The thing is, around here, it seems that this administration, the CCM administration, is adverse to making plans. And we've kept trying to nudge them along. It's like, okay, at least develop one or two. At least adopt one or two of the sustainable development goals. There are 17, but develop two and work on them, because we realize that it seems like they can't walk and chew gum. So at least just the first two fundamental ones, you know, poverty and food, you know, nutrition. Because no one should be going to bed hungry, you know, and you still have people going to bed hungry. But when we bring up issues, for some reason, people don't want to discuss issues. I went to a place over Bath, and I was discussing with a young lady about poverty, you know, and I said, you know, the reason why I would have entered politics is because I can't look at people in poverty not doing well and other people who should be representing them doing, you know, so much better. The disparity really keeps me up at night. Lo and behold, of course, you know, it's one of the followers, you know, and she would have, I guess, being obedient, would have gone back and reported that I said something about poverty. The premier came on the radio and said, no, you can't be telling people about poverty. You know, why is she going telling people about poverty?
I heard that, yeah.
And I'm like, what is this guy for real? Poverty is one of the issues that he should have been targeting early o'clock to make sure that you eliminate poverty. But he has no intention to. He has no goal to achieve. You know, he doesn't have any plan to achieve that goal. A basic human right, you know. And he's saying, don't discuss poverty. So you shouldn't discuss with someone who is in poverty how they should get out of it. And so he says, and the reason why I can say boldly that he has no intentions of working on that as a goal, he has said, poverty has been with us since time immemorial, and poverty would continue to be with us. So he has already said that he has done his best, you know, and so if his best means that 30% of us in poverty, it means that we're not likely to get any better a second time around or third time around. Because if he's in power for 15 years, he's been representing St. John's for 15 years, and things are this bad now, I don't see where an additional 5 years people could be optimistic about the outcome. You got to be drinking something, you know, or be smoking something to think that the outcome is going to be any better than it is now. And I can assure you that things are going to get worse, you know. So we need to focus, and I think it is a good measure. We should set the goals. Like I said, the rest of the world is on the Sustainable Development Goals bandwagon. We need to wake up, catch up, jump on the bandwagon, because we are leaving people behind who are suffering. You know, this disparity between the haves and the have-not is not sustainable. It's not fair, you know, it's not humane. But if that is what people want, I've said to people, and I know that, you know, some of my colleagues in NRP kind of, you know, shudder when they hear me say this, but I've said to people, if that is what you want, that is what we would all get. Because I am not going to be involving myself in things like bribery and things like that. When the vote should reflect the way people feel. So I'm not going to try to pay you for your vote, disrespect you and pay you for your vote, and then get in government, but you didn't really want me. You know, let it fall where it may. Give people who are 98% literate a fair opportunity to express themselves and say who they want to, you know, represent them. If at the end of the day we want to suffer because we would have chosen to suffer, then I would say to people, my passport is expired. I have no way of getting out of here. I would stay here. We'll all suffer together. And like I said, We're balling now. The chances are it would only get worse. We'll continue to ball, but I can help everybody else ball, because I'm not going to do anything that is going to compromise my integrity to represent the people. If you know that you need representation, just like you go to church and the pastor asks you to come up because of salvation, you have to come up, make your, you have to change your life. You have to make a decision and say, I want better. Because if you go on the road and they say it leads to hell, then that is going to be your outcome. And then you can't blame anybody else at the end of the day. You can't blame the pastor. So you wouldn't be able to blame Patricia Bartlett, because I'm giving people the opportunity to choose something better. We can't continue to get people who are just into the flourish, who obviously have no intentions of getting you out of the quagmire that you're in now, and keep voting the same way. I think, and I strongly believe that there are enough of us here in Nevis who could make a difference, but we have to show up at the polls. I've met too many Nevisians who have decided that they've been turned off because they're disappointed in the performance of the present government. They're turned off and they want not to participate. And I'm trying to appeal to people that is not the way to go. If you want to change things, you're going to have to be a part of the change, or else all of us are going to stay here and suffer. And so the Sustainable Development Goals, you'll keep hearing us saying that that is the way to go. We have to make plans though. We can't just be spending money willy-nilly, not completing projects. I even heard the Premier saying that, we have the hospital to finish. No, really? The hospital to finish? You just realize that we had the hospital to finish? After such a mess that would have been made there, I think the junior minister would have said in Parliament, in the Nevis Island Assembly, that they would have already spent 14 million, and the point she was trying to make was that we are still within budget. And I'm like, you spent $14 million on what? Because those of us who live here, it grieves our hearts when we look at the hospital.
They say it's moving apace.
But those kind of words, to sway the people who are not on the ground, who are not feeling the pain, who are maybe in a different jurisdiction, where the basics there, are what we call the high-end part of, healthcare. Nothing is going on for us. And so when I heard him make reference to wanting to complete the hospital thing, I want to know from him, how much more is it going to take? And I think that is a fair question. How much more are we going to sink into this project? There must be accountability. And accountability ought to come at the polls. So it's up to the visions whether they want to continue the way they're going now. And I would try to appeal to them that this is where we're going is a dead end road. It's dead end. We're not achieving anything. We can't finish projects. You're hearing this over and over again. We can't finish projects. In the meantime, Nevisians are suffering. The cost of living is going through the roof. And that has a lot to do with the cost of fuel, because everything is going to go up now. And we've already faced a double whammy, and it just might be a triple, because we had COVID. Now we have the war. And from the way things are looking, it seems like COVID is on its way back again. There's a resurgence. And so where are we? We've been getting knocked out. And I think that might be what it is for us. It's a test to wake us up. It's time for us to wake up. Look at what is staring us in the face and make sure that we turn around.
Nevisians, you've got to begin to love yourself more. Make the change which will improve your quality of life. We've got 12 minutes to 10. We'll take our final break, and then when we get back, Dr. Pat will talk about affordable housing.
I say we tired, Max, say keep the momentum. Oh, Mr. Premier, where we get the energy from. I say we tired, time to protect the poor. Just remember, people matter more.
The final 10 minutes as we go up to the home stretch at 10 o'clock. Doc, you wanted to talk about affordable housing. The Premier has boasted that they've got 7 for the first time housing communities being developed, but can the people afford them?
Steve, thanks for the opportunity to talk about housing, because this thing has been on my mind. And when I see it, and I see what is being played out, we have to have a discussion, a serious discussion, an honest discussion about the state of housing in Nevis. Now, let us consider a few facts as it relates to the housing in Nevis, relative to what the Nevis Housing and Land Development Corporation involved in. Number one, we have many of the houses are unaffordable. Although they are dubbed affordable, they're not necessarily affordable to the people or the clients.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think my colleague JD, when she was here, I think she was trying to illustrate the pressures that people are facing, in that you may have a mortgage of $1,200, but your paycheck is not even $2,000.
Mm-hmm.
So that is usually taken off before the rest of the money get to you, because banks, they don't care about, they're not focusing on the social issues.
Mm-hmm.
They just want to get theirs. So theirs come out first, and then you have struggling families who then have to try to make ends meet with the $800 that is left, and that is about paying electricity, just basic stuff.
Mm-hmm. Food.
Right, food, electricity, clothing, water.
Schooling.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
And number two, most of the houses are owned by single mothers with dependent children. So, you see where I'm going with this?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Number three, many of the people are house poor. And I think that is the crux of the matter. Because what I mean when I say house poor, and I think I've tried to explain it before, you have a house, but after you would have paid for it, you're too poor to afford the basics.
Mm-hmm.
So the same situation we were saying, that they are unaffordable. And so most of your monies would go into your house. Because what people need to understand is, it's okay to have a house, but look at the attending costs associated with it. You have to have insurance for your house. You have to maintain your house. And the houses that we are building, most of them have roofs that the elements, particularly our main threat, which is hurricanes. It is easy to get these things that they're putting on the top of the roof dislodged and damage to roof. Now, how a poor woman who is already struggling, because most of the applicants, mind you, are single mothers with dependent children. So even though a lot of them right now are house poor, you still have a list of them waiting to get on the list, waiting to get houses. So it means that we are taking a good chunk of the people out of the regular economic activity on the island, and the economy is already struggling. Number four, and this is very important, the CCM would have duped people into thinking that if they voted for them, they would make their payments lower. But what would they have done once they got in office? All those poor people who would have been struggling to make ends meet, who would have been on the Nevis Housing and Land Development Scheme, repayment scheme, they were now shunted towards the commercial banks. And you know how ruthless they are. They're about getting their monies back with interest. So even though sometimes they may say, well, you're going through a rough time, you don't have to pay, there's a moratorium on your loan, but the interest is accruing. And so sometimes you find these people in a situation where the house, what they owe on the house is more than what the house really costs. They might as well move out and move on to something, a new house. But that is the situation all people are being trapped in. And many of them are at the point now that they risk losing their homes. And I say homes because for them it's not just a house, it's a home. They've created a place for them and their children to live comfortably, and sometimes that is being yanked out from underneath them because they just can't afford. And I remind you of the double or triple whammy which we have been facing over the last couple of years. Things have just been piling upon us, in increments really. And when we discuss housing, and people like to ask, and for almost anything, and it's a fair question. Now, what would NRP do? Because, and the thing is, we've been a little reluctant to put it out there because we realize that anything that we do would be copied. And these guys, they're not even bashful about it, you know. You do something or you say something, now and they go and they do exactly what they, you know, NRP said that they would do. But putting that aside, what NRP is going to do, and we've discussed, but in the first instance, we must recognize that what we have in is not what it is being purported to be. People are saying it is a housing revolution, you know. So we have 7 schemes going on at the same time. It's a housing revolution. Now, when you hear about a revolution, you expect something new, you know, something radical, something changing, you know. It's the same way they're building the houses. These single houses with a little piece of yard space that they've been building since this scheme started. So that in itself is a misnomer. But what we're really having is a housing crisis for the reasons that I would have explained before. And we have to first recognize that, because if we don't recognize it, we won't be able to address it and address it effectively. Number 2, we must realign the operations of the Nevis Housing and Land Development Corporation to its mission. Because the operation as it is now is not necessarily servicing the people, especially when they have to go to the bank. What it is now is that we have a statutory corporation which is in the red, and it is being used to empower some people, you know. So it is enriching some people at the expense of the island, you know. So we have to repurpose that. We have to make sure that we realign the operation with the mission, which is, and the mission was really to provide affordable housing. Not houses that people just occupy for a couple of years and then recognize they can't pay, and so they have to move on. No, because it is demoralizing in itself that you live in a neighborhood, you already started to develop friends, and then they put a fault on your house. And so the third thing, though, is that we must give relief to present owners. We must consider what I think is a buyback option from the banks. Buy back some of the mortgages, particularly for those people who are struggling. We must be able to do that. We must have an intervention there to prevent more of these people from losing their homes, because it's not fair. They would have paid for years, and then some mishap, not of their own doing, COVID. None of us have any you know, control over that. The war in Ukraine, none of us have any control over that. Another wave of COVID coming, you know, so those people who would have gotten moratorium time and time again.
No, go ahead.
Those people we have to...
She was just telling us we've got 3 minutes. I thought she was indicating we have a call.
Okay, we have 3 minutes. Okay, so let me just wind up. You know, so to prevent future, you know, crises, we must consider building smarter. So when we build, it doesn't make any sense a one size fit all for everybody. So you can't have a single house with a little yard space that some people just find it hard to maintain anyway and fence properly. Some. So we have to provide in the housing stock different alternatives, different options. So then a young man like yourself, you know, you can get an apartment, you know, with just a 1-bedroom or studio apartment or whatever. So that a little later you can trade that in and you can move on to something bigger when you get a family, you know, instead of everybody having these houses that they cannot afford. We must be able to, and I see it a lot of these houses, they don't even have spouting. We should be able to at least build smart enough so we can collect the water. It's a collective thing for each of these, and then funnel it to one storage area that services the community. As it relates to geothermal, well, that is not an option right now. But
the houses should have renewables.
But solar panels, right? You know, especially for these small communities, we should be able to at least introduce solar energy, you know, devices there, and be able to harvest some solar energy and be able to make the electricity, you know, lower. And then lastly, we must consider seriously implementing the rent-to-own concept. You know, it's not fair that you would have paid for 20 years as a poor person, especially people who, you know, they are the working poor. You know, they're willing, they've been paying, they're good about it. At the end of the day, they don't have anything to show for it after maybe living in the house for 30, 35, 40 years sometimes. So a rent-to-own option, I think, is an option that we seriously pursue to make life easier for our people.
1 minute to 10. Now, finally, in the month of March, we've seen March Madness in the political arena. Another convention is up this Sunday, the People's Labour Party. Is it going to get messier?
Well, I'm hoping that it doesn't. I'm hoping that maturity would win out, you know. I'm not expecting it to get any messier. Of course, we know who the Prime Minister is. He's going to answer in his own way, but I don't expect it to get as low as, you know, the PAMP convention did. I'm expecting, like I said, a little bit of enlightenment. So who asked for 21 million and how many, you know, how much they got, that kind of thing, you know, and the reason why people were scampering around after 2020 trying to, you know, outside of the coalition that existed, people apparently were seeking outside intervention in terms of trying to align themselves with other parties had the vote gone another way. You know, so those kind of things I would imagine as it relates to trust, that issue probably would come up. I'm hoping that it comes up so that people could understand why, you know, none of them seem to be able to trust the other. So
it's 10 o'clock. We're at the top of the hour, and as usual, Doc, you've been surgical. It's been an absolute pleasure sitting across from you on Your Voice with the NRP. Good night.
Thank you, and good night.
The views and opinions expressed on the preceding
Your voice, your voice, your voice with the NRP. This and every Monday, 8:30 to 10 p.m. Join host Stephen Semanas and the NRP candidates as they amplify your voice.
The views and opinions expressed on the preceding program were solely those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Nevis Broadcasting Company Limited or its advertisers.
With all the power from the tower, this is the powerhouse of the Eastern